Hello. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time, thanks for stopping by. And if this isn't your first time, thanks for coming back to watch this video. Like I promised, I am going to be sharing today about my experience, being touched by an angel twice in one day. And I want to thank you again for coming on to this channel. Okay, I'll just go right into it, so you don't take too much, of your time. It was 15 years ago in Nigeria, where I used to live. I had just completed my NYSC. For those who do not know, NYSC is National Youth Service Corps in Nigeria. When you're done with, your university education, you have to go serve your country for 1 year in any location you're posted to. So I was posted to Abuja, and I was getting ready to finish. I would say that from the time when I was going to finish, I had started to pray actually all through my youth service. I had been praying and asking God to please let me get a job as soon as I was done. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I didn't want to have to, just sit and be doing nothing. So I had been actively searching, quite honestly. I wanted to remain in Abuja at the time, but I was also very open to returning to Lagos. Before then, I had written an aptitude test for a company, one of the big consulting firms I had desired to work in, and they had said, okay, so I had passed the assessment test. And the next stage was supposed to, begin to have assessments and all. And they were going to hire me into a unit that I didn't want. So I said, oh no, I didn't want that unit. And they said, oh, okay, that means you would have to wait. We're not going to start hiring for this role or for this unit for like another year. And I said, oh yeah, that's fine, knowing I was going for youth service. And so just before I finished my youth service, I went on to apply. Rather, I sent an email to them and just reminded them about the scenario. Oh, I had passed the test. This is what you told me at the time. I'm almost done with my youth service. What's next? And fortunately, I got, a response almost, I think, less than 48 hours. I got a response. I was asked to come in for the first level interview. An assessment center. I came back. I went again for another interview. I came back. And so the final stage was going to be an interview with one of the partners at the company. And as a youth corps member, and of course as a church girl, I had been preparing our monthly all-night service. It was going to take place on the 1st of August. I remember very vividly, on the 1st of August. And I was just determined to be in Abuja for that meeting. I had prayed about it. I had very, very high expectations. So I determined that I was going to be in Abuja. And then my interview was on a Saturday at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. And quite honestly, it was crazy, right? It was a big risk I was taking. I remember my mom saying, why are you not in Lagos? You should have been in Lagos at least a day before. Anyone, any close person to me at the time had said, you should have been in Lagos at least a day before. You never know what would happen and all of that. But I guess coconut head, And so I stayed back. I attended the all-night service. And during the all-night service, there were some certain things. I'm gonna put up, the testimony I had written is a 4-page, sheet. I never shared, but I found that sheet. It's very interesting. I found that sheet 2 years ago or so, when I was moving stuff from my house. And I was so shocked. I was like, wow, this testimony, and I never shared it. So during one of the sessions in church, one of the pastors actually said, he was talking about favor, right? He was talking about favor, and he said, favor is when you're on a queue, all right? And then somebody says, hey, you there, come. And then he proceeds to help you. I remember it so well because I wrote it down in that testimony. I remember it struck a chord in me, and I just, I took it for myself. At the end of all of the prayers, there were healings, there were miracles, and people who had been healed were joining the healing line to give testimonies. They asked, the pastors had said, if you have a testimony, join the healing line. And I didn't have a physical testimony. I just had a knowing in my heart. Okay, I just had a knowing in my heart. But I joined the line all the same. I joined the line hoping I would get a chance to share. Even though I know that as I was on that line, I just kept having funny thoughts in my head. You've not even seen the miracle. How are you on the line to testify? But there I was. I believe it was, an exercise of my faith. So I just stood there. But then, of course, the line was very long. And in the end, I couldn't share that testimony because, all I was going to go there and say was, I heard this, the pastor said this, I have claimed it in my heart. I know in my heart that I have this testimony. That was what I was going to say at that, on that line. But somehow, the line was so long, time was going, and so the pastor said, you know what? Maybe we're going to, document some of these testimonies, go document it and then share it in your church afterwards and stuff like that. And so that was why I went and I determined that I was going to write my testimony. And so the all night finished, I left. My plan was to go to the airport that morning. I had looked online to check the prices of tickets. I was planning to go to the airport that morning and buy a ticket. There were rebate tickets, discounted tickets for youth corps members, and I think it was about 13,000 naira from what I saw online. So I was just going to go to the airport and then show my ID card, youth corps member, and get that discount. But I walked there very majestically on Saturday morning at about 8:39 or so, whatever time it was, I don't remember now. But I walked in there and I'm like, I want to get a ticket. Oh, okay. First of all, I was told to join the queue. And I'm like, okay, I just want to confirm that, I can get a rebate. I wanted to show my ID and everything. And they're like, rebates? You should have bought it since. There's no space anymore. And they try to explain, they just leave a certain quota for that discounted ticket. And so, sorry, gone for today. I'm like, what? So there I was, almost stranded, right? So I just joined the queue, and then I'm like, okay, so how much is the ticket? And I looked to see a full price ticket. Once again, I had checked online. Full price ticket was 17,000, right? I think it was 17,000 or 16,500, something like that. And then the deposit slip that was on the counter read 18,000. I'm like, whoa, what am I going to do? So there I was, not knowing what to do. I had 17,000 naira in cash because in my mind my ticket was 13,000 naira, another 4,000 or 5,000 naira for taxi to the location. The office was was on the island in Lagos. So of course I was almost gonna get destabilized, but I just kept on reminding myself, when you have the job, just calm down. And so I went to the ATM. I withdrew. I think I had 1,000. I don't know. I probably had 3,000 or 5,000 naira left in that account. So I just withdrew. So I was now holding 20,000 naira. And so I joined the queue with everyone else. Okay. So I'm on the queue. Remember, my interview is at 2 p.m. And I'm hoping to get, I think the flight that they had next, they were trying to, fill up, was about 11 o'clock. So in my head, I've calculated 11 o'clock, I'm going to get to Lagos, 12:30. I'm just going to dump my box and then just head out to the island. And I'm like, whatever happens, I'm sure I'll get there by 2. It's a Saturday, there won't be traffic. I had done all those estimations in my head. So I'm standing on the queue and a man walks up to me and says, have you filled out your teller? And I said, yes, I have. And he looks at it and he said, okay, and he walked away. I don't remember now if he asked other people the same question, but he just asked me and I answered, and that was it. He came a second time and he asked, are you a student? And I said, no, I'm not. And he looked at me and said, okay, and he walked away. I think that as every time I reflect on it, I think back and I'm like, see somebody, you were looking for a cheaper ticket or you were hoping for a miracle. You should have just grabbed him and said, come, how far now? Can you help me? You know how we do it in Nigeria. Can you help me? But there I was. I just answered him nonchalantly, and he went. That was the second time. He came a third time with a teller, a pre-filled teller that read 16,200. And he gave it to me and said, take this one, write your name on it, and then come. And I'm looking at him. I looked around me. I was not even sure if anybody noticed, because my teller read 18,000. He brought me a teller that said 16,002, and he said, fill it out, write your name, and then follow me. When that happened and I looked around, I didn't see anybody else looking at me funny, and I'm like, okay, this is what the pastor said, right? Somebody just walks up to you and says, you come, follow me. And so the guy, I followed him, and he just took me to the front. Before I could say Jack Robinson, I was making a payment for the ticket, and voila, I had a ticket. So I'm like, what just happened? Like, I couldn't even explain my happiness. I couldn't explain my happiness, quite honestly, because there, he had saved me money, and I can imagine, who knows if by the time it got to my turn, they would have said the plane was full. But that was my first testimony. God sent an angel, and again, like I said, I was supposedly hoping for a miracle to get to Lagos in time. I didn't grab that guy and say, come help me. But I'll just say that God, in his mercy, he knew exactly how it was going to play out. And so the guy kept coming back. He kept coming back until literally, like, the story of the angels taking Job and his family out just before, the fire broke out in Sodom and Gomorrah. He took him by the hand and took him out of there. That was exactly what God did for me at the airport on that day. Now, the second part of this testimony is the more mind-blowing one. So I arrived in Lagos. Good flight. I arrived in Lagos, and I go straight to the venue. I got there at about 2 o'clock or 2:15, something. I was a few minutes late, but I got in and I was told, oh, okay, you're not late. Actually, your interview or your time was miscommunicated, or there was an error in the communication. So you're actually supposed to be seen at 4 p.m. And I'm like, 4 p.m.? This was like 2. And I thought, well, okay, all things work together for my good. And so I sat there, and I was just, I don't know, I was just mindlessly looking at the TV or maybe playing with my phone. I don't recall what I was doing. Somewhere along the line, a staff of the company walks in. It was a weekend. She walks in with a guy. I don't know if it was her husband or her boyfriend or her brother, I don't know, but she walks in with a guy. The guy sits in the reception beside me. The lady goes into the office. I just, again, casually say hello. He says hi, and we continue doing whatever it was we were doing. And I just kept looking at the time. The person who was going to interview me had come out at some point, to say, oh, sorry for the delay and all of that. I'm going to see you at 4. And I'm like, no problem. I'm here. I'm waiting. And so we kept sitting down there. I sat down there until, of course, it was like 3:30. The guy came out again. The interviewer came out at about 3:30, I recall, and he was finishing with somebody. And so he said, okay, I have just finished with this last person. I should give me a few minutes and I'll call you in. And I said, no problem. Thank you. So shortly after he left, the guy who's been beside me all the while just turns to me and asks, what do you think about the Boko Haram incident? And I'm like, Boko Haram, who's that? He looks at me in shock, like, you don't know about the Boko Haram incident? And I'm like, no, who is Boko Haram? Or, what is it about? And then he proceeds to tell me about Boko Haram. Oh, a terrorist group that had just recently attacked a state in the north. They had, talk about all the hazard or the havoc they had caused, the lives they had, wasted. He talks to me about all of the theories, the different schools of thought regarding who was behind it. He just gave me, he literally broke it down, like a news analyst. He broke it down to me. And I'm just there nodding. I'm like, oh, wow. When did this happen? 2 days prior to this. Can you imagine? And Uwem was not aware. And so there I was, just listening to him, taking it all in. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's interesting. So we're still talking when my interviewer comes and, calls me into the interview. And we get along quite well. It was a 1-hour interview. We talked about different things. He asked about school. He asked all the questions he wanted to ask. And then I think he had said, oh, I have just one more question, So this was at the end of the interview. And then he just goes, what do you think about the Boko Haram incident? Oh my God. Yes. I think I was too shocked. I started laughing. And he asked why I laughed. And I said, well, I'm just surprised that he would ask me that. And he's like, oh, why not? And I said, okay. And yours truly, I just began to download everything I had heard an hour before that time. I downloaded everything. I broke it down, the analysis. I gave him the analysis the same way I had received it, and then added a few of my own thoughts. And he was just looking at me, and he's like, oh wow, you have really been following the news. And I just nodded. Yeah, right. If only you knew that I have just been saved by an angel. And so of course I walked out of that interview so confident, like nothing could take it away again. I had received the confirmation, I had received the confirmation that I had that job. Because why? What was the reason? Why would God send somebody to help me get a cheaper ticket so I could save some money? And then why would God also send somebody to tell me the one question, to tell me the answer to the one question that I would not have known in that interview? I don't know what to make of that, but for me, it was amazing. Of course, I got back home and I told my mom. She was just screaming. She's like, don't worry, you have the job. Pack your things and come back. And wow. So that's the testimony. Praise the Lord, church. And let me tell you another part. Years later, of course, I started to work at that company, and in the course of, on a project discussion, I got to talk to the same partner, and, he was, I think I was having a performance challenge, and then he reminded me of my final interview with him and said, no, I know who I hired. I remember you were so articulate. Not all this, shy girl you're trying to form right now. You were so articulate, you were so clear. He talked about how I answered that question, how that just blew his mind completely. And I asked him that day, I said, was that question going to be a determining question? He said, well, yes, because, part of what we're looking for, here as analysts, we want people who are up to date on trends. We want to work with people who are aware of their environment. They're up to date with basically what's going on. And so, yes, after you had answered everything else, if you didn't know that, that would just mean that you were not aware, because that was a very recent happening. And so I proceeded to tell him the testimony of that day. And he looked at me. He said, you're joking. I said, no, I'm not. Everything I told you that day, I heard it barely an hour before. He got up from his seat. He looked at me. He said, no, you're joking. I said, no, I'm not. Why would I joke about a thing like that? It was truly, truly a miracle. It was truly, truly a miracle. And years later, I still cannot stop thanking God about it, thanking God for it. So on this note, I just want to round up by saying that mercy is what helped me. God's mercy stepped in, okay, at that time for me on that day. God saw the gap, he saw what was going to be missing, and he stepped in, okay. And I just want to just encourage you, if there's something you're expecting, there's something you're looking forward to, you've done everything you know to do, just trust in God's mercy, trust in his love, trust in his grace, and he would bring it to pass. Thank you very much for staying with me. Thank you for watching this amazing testimony that has been long overdue. Now, I'm not sure what the next testimony is going to be. I was so sure what the first testimony is going to be, right? But there have been so many more since then. I'm not sure yet which one I'm going to give next, but look forward to the next one. Thank you once again for watching, and please share this video to encourage somebody's faith, to strengthen someone's faith, and come back again for the next one. Bye.